sort of a cap like this, and I saw on the table here. And he said, are you checking this tape?
Well, not yet.
Well, don't so frightened. That cap would just pounce up and down my hair and stand up on my And, he came back from the war, and just before my mother was born. And so she was born in my grandmother's 45th year, and my mother would be 117, so that would make Grandma about 162, wouldn't it?
Something like that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Today is November 2nd, isn't it?
I don't know.
Yes.
Joe, it's November.
November 2nd,
and I know something about November.
You do? What?
The 24th day of this month, I'll be 85 years old.
85?
Yeah, 85.
So you were born November 2nd, what year?
1898. No, November the 24th. I was born on Thanksgiving Day.
1898?
1898, right in the middle of the Spanish-American War.
What's your full name?
Mary Eidth.
Mary Eidth Hall.
H-A-L-L. Yes.
And your full name is Willis Gore?
W.T. Gore, his name is. Now he's changed.
Thomas Willis Gore.
Thomas Willis.
On my birth certificate, I never could wear the name Thomas very good, and I've been putting the Willis first, on my...
W.T.
Right. And when's your birthday, sir?
October 26, 1910.
See, he's only 73.
I wasn't here in statehood.
Yeah.
That's young.
Ma'am, who is your father?
Charles Garnet Hall.
And where was he from?
Now, he was in Missouri.
Missouri.
He was born in Missouri and migrated to Texas, of course, after the war.
Where were you born?
Montague, Texas.
Montague, Texas.
Montague, Texas. Didn't have a railroad.
Mm-hmm. And sir, where were you born?
Here in Altus.
Althus?
At 1012 North Hudson. He was born.
Okay. Who was your mother?
My mother was Sophronia Ellen Rosanna Ryan Hall. That's what Mama said. She was Ellen Ryan, and she married my father, which was Ellen Ryan Hall. Now, Mama was born in Alabama, as I told you.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, was it your grandfather that was in the Civil War?
No, that was my grandfather's oldest son, Uncle William.
Oh, okay.
Uncle William Ryan.
Tell me some of the Civil War stories that he told you.
Civil War stories.
You mentioned the one he was a runner for Bragg, a courier for General
he was
Bragg.
A courier for Bragg.
Yeah.
And because he was too young, you see, to be an active soldier. Then I had an auntie, an auntie. One of those Yankees came down here and he said, "What do you mean by aunt?" And I said, "Well, I'm a relative, my mother's sister." And he said, "Oh, well, that isn't an aunt, that's an aunt." So you want to remember that and speak correctly. Ant, he said, an ant is just a little red insect, but an aunt is a relative, a human being. So you remember that when you go to say, "Aunt, my aunt." We always did. Well, anyhow, then this was Uncle William who had to go to the service, and Grandpa was too old, so he stayed at home and compounded the medicines for the whole community. And
He
I
was
guess,
he had an apothecary shop.
yes, yes, you know, quinines and he got the iron from the anvils. I told you the blacksmith, and he shoed the horses for the Civil War people. I mean the soldiers and things. And so then their oldest daughter, my Aunt Mary, um, and this young man were married. She was a bride, a widow, and a mother in a year's time. Her Uncle Redden, of course, was mustered out. He didn't think he'd have to go. So they were married, and I don't think they'd been married more than 3 months, maybe 4. So they took him, you know, the South needed help, and badly. So this young man, my Aunt Mary's husband, took the measles. They got measles in the camp, and the battle was about to be called, and he didn't tell his commander that he was ill. He felt like his duty was to be at the front, and so they had to swim a little creek to get over there to engage in the battle. And of course, he with the measles already, he didn't live very long.
What battle was that?
Now you've got me. I don't believe I ever asked Mama or Grandpa. I mean my uncle. I didn't know my grandfather.
Yeah. Any other stories you remember of the Civil War?
Let me see. Oh, well, these are so mediocre. They're just little stories. But Grandpa decided after the war the South was gone. He told my grandmother, he said, now the South's gone. We've got to, these children here, they had 12 children. And we'd better get to moving out and go west. And my grandmother said, not I. I'll never leave Alabama. So one day she thought about it after Uncle William came home. And she said, well, he's right. We must make a new home. And because these children they're going to go west. So she put on her sunbonnet, went out to the field where Grandpa was plowing, I guess, and she said, Smith, I'm ready to go to Texas. So they just took everything they had, and they got on a flatboat somewhere. I think this was somewhere in Tennessee. Willis, do you remember anything about this story? And Grandma and the children came through in a covered wagon, of course. And Grandpa and 2 or 3 of the boys came on flatboat. So they settled in Paris, Texas. Well, it's a long story. Of course it is. And 3 of that family, my grandfather Ron's sons, became doctors. Dr. J.A. Ryan was the first staff doctor at St. Anthony's Hospital. He was an 89er. Made the run.
Yeah.
Staked out a lot, just a lot. And Mr. Colcord. Now, have you ever heard of Mr. Colcord?
Oh, yes. Charles Colcord. Yes.
Built the Colcord building in Oklahoma City, which was fabulous in those days, you know. And my Uncle Doc and Mr. Colcord, became such dear friends. And so when Uncle Doc staked out this lot, which was on First Street, Mr. Caulker said, "Doc, you're the biggest fool I ever saw." He said, "That's not worth a thing." And so when Uncle Doc was offered fabulous amount of money for it, later on, Mr. Caulker said, and Uncle Doc was going to take it. Mr. Caulker said, "Doc, you're the biggest fool I ever saw. Take that amount of money." You see, you never know.
Yeah. Did your uncle ever talk about the run?
Yes, I've heard Uncle Doc talk about it. Now this Uncle Doc, one I call Uncle Doc, he was Dr. James Anderson Ryan, Oklahoma City. Lived there always since '89. Of course, he's been dead many, many years. And then Grandpa and Grandma Ryan had two other sons who became physicians, successful physicians.
Tell me about the stories your uncle told about the run, the day of the run.
Oh, now, do I remember what Uncle Doc told us about the run?
No, I don't
When he went in there and staked out this lot? Aunt Claire? I don't remember
I'll tell
anything
you
about
what,
that.
I remember one story he told about, it wasn't Oklahoma City, but that was before the run, I guess. There used to be a little community in eastern Oklahoma. I guess it's either in Marshall or Love County, and they called it Jimtown. And he helped build the general store, and post office. And they got to talking, and every one of those fellas that is there working on that building, their name was Jim.
6, weren't it?
Something like
6
that.
Jims.
And I could have took down the names of the others at that time. Nobody never thought about they. But anyway, they called it Jimtown.
Yeah.
But very few people know a whole lot about it. There's some you strike that knows where Jimtown was, but
It's still in existence,
it's not
I
a
think.
town that made a big town.
You say it's still there?
I think it's still Jimtown. We used to go down to Montague for homecoming, and I think Jimtown is still there. And it was named for these 6 Jims, and Uncle Doc was one of the Jims.
Yeah. Sir, who was your father?
E.T. Gore,
E.E. Gore.
or you can say Ellis E. Gore.
Where was he from?
He came here from Corsicana, Texas. That is, came to Oklahoma Territory. He was born and originated in Mississippi.
How come he came to Oklahoma?
He was brother of T.P. Gore.
Yeah.
And they originated in Mississippi. And T.P. Gore was, he is very ambitious even as a boy, and he became blind. And his father, make any kind of sacrifice for him and his real smart boy, and he wanted to get into politics, and he wasn't, an old state like Mississippi, and he wasn't doing much good about getting into politics, because, they were just tenant farmers, and so he wanted to go to west to Corsicana. Funny thing about that is now they went to a town, though, that was as old as their town, because Corsicana's probably as old as, that was in Webster County, Mississippi. But anyway, the whole family went. That is, all except one sister, and she'd already left the household. They went to Corsicana, and there he put on some struggles there, and he ran for Congress there, and but he saw that he espoused remember the populist. They had what they called the populist party in those days.
Mm-hmm.
He espoused the populist party. It became evident that the populist party was going to go on the rocks, and so he then wanted to come to Oklahoma Territory to continue his political struggles, we'll call them. And he came to Lawton before my father did. My father stayed in Corsicana until their father died, and then he came to Oklahoma. Of course, by that time, T.P. Gore had gotten into the territorial legislature.
Was he blind at this time?
Yes, sir. He was blind
Was he born blind, or did it just...
No, it was two different accidents. One of them, in those towns that have what they call sort of a commons, and people sort of pasture their cattle, and he and another boy were out there chasing a cow, and they were throwing sticks at the cow, and he got hit in the eye with one of those sticks. Then when he was old enough to he was a pretty bright boy, and so his daddy got him a chance to be a page in the Mississippi Senate, and he went to Jackson. And while he was there, he wanted to buy something for my dad to bring home, and he bought one of those, it was a gun, it shot an arrow, and, or shot something like an arrow, and when he got back, I'd already given it to my father. Something about it, some mechanical bug or something, and he was looking down that barrel to remedy that, and it went off and hit him in the other eye.
So he lost both eyes.
And he didn't go totally blind until he was probably about ready to come out of high school. They had a lot of normal schools, they called them in those days, normal colleges. He was about ready for that when he went totally blind, but he was the kind of fellow, he even went to that school in Lebanon, Tennessee, law school. And he was just that kind of fellow.
What was his personality like, Senator Gore?
Well, he
was more outgoing, wasn't he, than your dad, Senator Gore, to have been a politician. And he was a politician, slick one. Oh, he met people.
Well, he was an eloquent talker and conversationalist.
Did you know that they always called him an orator? Yes.
Oh, that was back in the days of, you even heard the expression silver tongue.
Yeah.
Orator. And they also wore long hair. And he wore some long hair for a time there when he was now to show you what he could do and would do when they lived at Corsicana. He was engaging in that speech, learned how to speak, or he had. And that was had the Chautauqua. So he went by himself blind, and you had to go they're more based in the northern states than was the south. He had to go up in one of the northern states and get in that, get in the Chautauqua, become a performer
Speaker.
and speaker, and he took a money belt with him, and he came back to Corsicana after their season, and he had $1,000 in his money belt. Those were cartwheel dollars, you know.
Well,
But
did he
him
make that
blind,
speaker?
and none of his folks went with him.
Huh.
But that's the kind of fellow he was.
Did he was a determined sort of a man.
Now he was in the territorial legislature, you say?
Yes, he was.
He was elected from what district?
Well, Comanche.
Comanche, Lawton.
Lawton. How long was he in?
Well-
U.S. Senator.
Well, he had that for 20 years. He had it 14, and then 6 more.
14, that'd be
He had it
20,
from
20 years.
He was a friendly fellow. He was adept at meeting people, of course, and
Now he was the first U.S. senator, wasn't he? From the
he
state
was
of Oklahoma.
one of them. Yes.
Yeah. He and who was the other senator?
Robert L. Owens.
Oh, that's right.
Who's that?
Robert L. Owens.
Oh, Robert L. Owens. Let's see.
Yeah.
Now, we've heard of him, haven't we?
Right. Sir, who was your mother?
Well, the only mother I ever knew was her sister. Her name was Gussie.
But give you a real mother. Her name was Mabel Hockett.
Well, that
Was his real mother. And then my sister married his father when this child was 20 months old.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had that young'un ever since.
Mm-hmm. So your relationship is
No blood.
no blood by marriage.
Sure.
So your sister married his father.
Father.
Okay.
And raised his child.
Mm-hmm.
And what my mother didn't do. I think you stayed at Granny's about as much as you did at home because my sister was always working.
What kind of work did your father do?
He was an attorney.
An attorney?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when did your father come to Oklahoma?
You know, I can't tell you the precise dates. It was sometime before,
Statehood.
not long before statehood. He came and got a job in the land office in Lawton. You know, that was when they'd opened up what they call the big pasture.
Mhm.
That was this area around Frederick, and
Yeah.
and he did clerical work in there at Lawton. And
T.P. Gore now was the drawing card for him. That's why he came to Lawton.
Yeah.
Was because his brother Tom was there, the senator, you know.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's right. Of course, T.P. was able to, could get him a job.
Sure.
And he took the. He was an attorney in Texas. Now, the way the Texas do, my dad had a job in Corsicana as deputy chancery clerk, I believe they called him, or deputy court clerk, and so you just sort of let the judge know that you were wanting to become a lawyer, and you had a good vantage point there in that job, and you were admitted by the district judge whenever he decided that you were ready to hang up your shingle.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when he came to Oklahoma, though, it was decided that they had to take the bar exam. And they had the first bar exam at Guthrie. and he was in that. So that was getting pretty close to statehood.
Did he talk about taking that bar exam, the first one?
He talked about, yes, he talked some about, he made a good grade. And he talked to some about a fellow he got acquainted with there. That fellow's name was Andrew Jackson Welch, who later practiced at Clinton. And, but nothing.
When did your dad start studying law?
Well, he started when they, now you know, their father, his name was Thomas Madison Gore. He became a chancery clerk in Mississippi as an independent. And he held that office not quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
See, there was
They finally beat him. He wasn't
family tendency there.
He wasn't a Democrat. He, for some reason, he held it as an independent, and they finally beat him. But they was sort of, heard a little law when they were boys, and then when they went to Mississippi, I think that clerk's name I heard was Charlie Toll, and he got a job as a deputy under Charlie Toll there in Corsicana. And
Willis,
that
of course,
is
was
where
brought
he
up
let
in
him
that
know that he
atmosphere.
was
He didn't know anything else but to practice law.
that he was reading law.
Wouldn't work.
That is, yes, that's right.
So
Yeah.
he
Well,
made,
do
he made
something.
his living
Mm-hmm.
by,
How long did you live in Texas, Miss Hall?
I think I was only 2 years old when my people left there. My father and mother left there and went to Tishomingo, stayed there about 3 weeks, and they didn't like that. And then they went to Gainesville. And
Went back to Texas then.
Sir?
They went back to Texas then, to Gainesville?
Yeah, to Gainesville, Texas. And he worked for Westheimer and Dalby. They're the Jews. That's where my father learned to be a salesman from the Jews environment. And then they went with this same company over to Ardmore and stayed there for a while, moved back to Gainesville, and then they moved to Sulphur, Oklahoma, which was Sulphur IT.
Yeah.
And so we were in Sulphur when Sulphur became Oklahoma. Indian Territory became Oklahoma, which was 1907. And in 1909, my father and mother moved out here to Altus.
Yeah. Do you remember Statehood Day in Sulphur?
No, sir, I didn't. You see, I was just 10 years old when we moved here.
Yeah.
And so I didn't remember anything about that. I was 10 years old. I should have, but I wasn't interested.
Yeah. Do you remember the trip from Sulphur out here to Altus?
I sure do.
Tell me about the trip.
Oh, my word. Well, you see, my father had a grocery store in Sulphur, Oklahoma. And, so he sold the stock down, as much as he could. And then he just chartered a car, a railroad car. Well, that's all that. He chartered that car, and my father and my mother had been out here prospecting. They went to Wellington, Texas, and they were so nice to them there that they decided that Willis was Wellington to Quanah. It was Quanah, wasn't it? It went to Quanah. And so it's kind of vague to me. And so anyhow, my mother and my sister was a young lady then, my oldest sister, his stepmother, and she walked the streets and cried and said, I just won't live here. Now, kids have been like that always. You would have thought that back there in those days that the parents had said, young lady, we're the boss. But they listened to the children then just like they listen to the children now.
Mm-hmm.
Parents are parents and children are children. Well, she had her influence. And so Mama didn't like it either. And so she said, Charlie, that was my father, said, now, I saw a little town when we were out here prospecting as we came out here. And I liked that little town. And it was Altus. So she said, I'll tell you what, let's do. Let's just go back to this little town, Altus. So Dad just rechartered the car right back to Altus.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to sell the milk cow, though, because they couldn't bring her across the quarantine.
Yeah.
But they brought the horse. And so we literally landed.
Mm-hmm.
That's 74 years ago.
Yeah.
Next June will be 75 years, 3/4 of a century. Well, I said we literally landed here.
Mm-hmm.
Dad had spent everything he had moving out there, you know. And so we almost had to stop and start making a living. Well, anyhow, we've been here ever since.
Mm-hmm. What?
And I'm the only survivor,
Yeah.
my thing.
What were your first memories of Altus? What did the town look like?
The first memories of Altus would be First Baptist Church. My family hadn't been here long until we joined First Baptist Church. And from that on, it's just been Altus and First Baptist Church. That's all.
Hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
But we certainly had some good old friends here.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember anything of the Depression of 1907?
Oh, well, I lived through it, and I was
You mean he said
a grown
19?
person.
This is 1907.
1907.
1907.
Yeah. There was a depression that year also. The same year of statehood.
Well, we didn't know anything about that. And we didn't know anything about the depression we had in 38.
Yeah.
We didn't know anything about that.
Yeah.
We just lived through it.
Mm-hmm.
And we had plenty to eat.
What
We
kind of
didn't
work?
suffer.
Yeah. What kind of work did your father do?
My father put up a little grocery store here in Altus, and we just had dirt roads or streets around the square, you know, and wooden sidewalks. And he found a little old vacated frame building down there just a block from the National Bank of Commerce here now.
Mm-hmm.
Put up a little grocery store, and he just did well. And finally, Mr. Hatley built those 3 buildings. You don't know anything about Altus, do you?
A little, not much.
Well, on the north side of the square, he put some big buildings in there too, and my father rented that and put up his grocery store there. Well, so he stayed in the grocery store business for some years, and he was offered this good opportunity as salesman for T.D. Turner and Company in Oklahoma City. They were a wholesale produce company. And, oh my, that was just out of this world. They paid such good salary, you know. So my father took this traveling job. And, you know, where the Bell Telephone building is now,
Mm-hmm.
it was a wagon yard. And my father rented a little team of paint ponies to make his territory. He went clear to Wellington. We call that the branch. And he made all his towns around here for T.D. Turner and Company. They shipped their stuff out in refrigerated cars.
Mm-hmm.
You see, this was they handled vegetables, and later they became, well, sort of wholesale dealers for Del Monte and Maxwell House coffee, and my father said, "Now don't ever buy anything but Maxwell House coffee." So I don't forget. I do
How
break
come?
it.
How come he said don't buy anything but Maxwell House
Because
coffee?
he sold it.
Yeah.
It was the best coffee on the market, you know. My father was a born salesman. And so then later on, Mr. Turner, T.D. Turner and Company, bought him a car. Model T was the first one, Model T. And my father would take us with him in the summertime, you know, to all these towns around here. He was home every night. And so he said, "Now, you kids, take your umbrellas." No, your parasol. Because the parasol fends off the sun, you know. Para means to fend.
Yeah.
And sol means sun, to fend off the sun. So it was parasol. He said, "Now be sure and take the parasol, because I can't let the top up of this car. It takes too much gasoline to operate." So we ran with the top down and held a parasol over. Oh, it was a lot of fun.
How fast would you go in the Model T?
How far?
How fast?
Oh, I guess we went 20 miles an hour. But we didn't dare go that fast because we didn't have any traffic lights or anything like that. Oh,
What were the roads like back then?
one chug hole after another. Why, you never went anywhere. You didn't get stuck. And you'd dig and you'd push and you'd pull. Every time we went, we had to push.
Is that why it took you long to push?
Oh, and so we just, so then my dad stayed with that job, I think, about 30 years. Of course, that company changed hands, became, what was it, Willis?
Turner Altus.
Turner Altus.
Nash Finch.
And
Turner
then
Altus and Nash Finch.
Nash Finch finally bought them.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, my dad worked for them for about 30 years, and those were good old days.
Mm-hmm. So what are your first memories of Althus?
Well, of course, I was around home there a lot when I was just a child, and they had gotten rid of those board sidewalks when I started going to town.
Oh, is that right?
I don't remember any
Well,
of them.
I'm declare I didn't know that. I don't remember when they put that first pavement down. You couldn't get down South Main. You know, every Sunday afternoon we'd go to Sunday school and church.
Now, you know,
And then we'd come home and guess what we did for recreation?
What?
We'd walk down to the depot to see the train come in.
when my father
Willis,
built
you
his
remember
house,
that.
we didn't have a light plant here, but he wired the house. And for years there, that wire would be sticking out of the ceiling, that'd be all. We used a coal oil lamp. And then the city installed a light plant. And I remember then they came in and put the drops in. And we thought that was so wonderful, you know. We didn't have any chandeliers or anything, but we had, well, those bulbs were covered by a little glass thing. And we had electric light.
What year was that?
You know, I can't pinpoint the years.
You must
Our
be
house was probably built in 1908. And I wasn't born until 10. And I wouldn't remember that until I'd become probably
4 or 5.
7 or 8 years old.
Oh,
Yeah.
7.
Mm-hmm.
It must have been, well, really, I wouldn't remember it. It must have been pretty close to World War I.
I've lived through 5 wars, haven't I?
Mm-hmm.
Now, she was born in Spanish American, then World War I, World War II, Korean War, in the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
You know, if I don't hurry up, I'm going to have to live through another.
That's right. Question. As children, what kind of chores did you two do around the house?
Oh, we had my sister and I, my oldest sister, his mother married at 23, you know, and so that just left Lynn and I, my sister, she's 2 years, 9 months older than I was. And, you know, we had to clean the lamp chimneys. Yes, sir.
How do you clean them?
Well, Mama had us to just wash them and shine them up. And then the next day they were all smoked again. Oh, that was awful. Now that was one chore. And then I can remember back in Sulphur before we moved out here to Altus, on Saturday our chore was to stack up the wood, cord up the wood. Every week she bought a load of wood. And it was fixed up in little pieces, you know. You put those sticks in the stove. And on Saturday, we'd have to get out there cold or heat, didn't make any difference. That was our chore. And we'd stack up that, cord it up, you know, to make it nice and even, wouldn't be scattered out on the ground. Now, that was one chore we did back in Sulphur. And when we came out here to Altus, I don't know, I believe we used coal. Yeah, that's what we did. We burned coal.
Yeah. Is there a difference between cooking wood and heating wood?
Cooking wood, eating wood.
Wood you'd use in a cook stove in the kitchen versus...
Oh, no, there wasn't for us.
Yeah.
We used the same sticks.
Mm-hmm.
And I had one brother, and his chore was to split the kindling. You don't know anything about starting a fire every morning.
Oh, yes.
Did you ever hear about that?
Yes, ma'am.
You get up in the morning, and you take the paper and the kindling and the kerosene, if you dared, and pour the kerosene on there and struck a match to it. Then you put your stove wood on. And out here, the coal went on top of the kindling, you know.
Did you take turns starting the fire, or was it one person every morning starting the fire?
No, we didn't, Lynn and I didn't get up. It was my brother's chore. That was his chore, to get up and build a fire.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had a great big base burner heating stove.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sir, what kind of chores did you do?
Well, you know, it was my duties to what we call bring in the coal. In those days, everyone had a coal bin and a coal scuttle. And so, some of those pretty lumpy. The lumps had to be broken up, and I remember doing that. It'd be my job to see if the scuttle was full of coal.
Mm-hmm.
And well, later on we had some milk cows, but
Well, if you had milk and butter, you had cow.
Yeah.
You sure did. I remember when we first came out here, we got a little house, only house in this town. Oh, this was a booming town. Had the biggest alfalfa mill in the world and the biggest compress in the world. Oh, this was a town. And, well, hello. Say, we're keeping this man. He hadn't had a bite of lunch. Your chore to do.
Oh, you name it. I did it.
You didn't do any cooking.
Oh, sure I did.
Why, no, your mother did all that.
No, I started
Most
making-
all of it, because food stuff was too scarce. And sewing, oh, I'd love to have sewed. Mother was a good seamstress, you know, but she never would let us sew because material was just too scarce. And she said, now, children, we just can't afford to waste it. Well, we didn't waste anything.
Yeah.
We just didn't waste anything in the world. Who's there? I told Joe here that Mr. Todd,
Oh, call me Joe.
I said, now, you know, we didn't have a hard time. We had a good time. There were four children, and my mother and my father, and we had a happy home. And as I told him, we didn't know anything about depression. We just had always had depression.
World War One.
World War One. Oh, I was a young lady.
Tell me about those days.
Oh my, we'd go down here to watch the boys off, you know, and those were thrilling days. World War One.
Did you do any work for the war effort?
No, sir, I didn't. I didn't do any. Well, I did too. We met and made these 4x4 wipes, you know, out of gauze, and sent those to the army camp. Yes, I did. I made something.
Mm-hmm.
I contributed something to the war.
Sir, do you remember?
I was in what you call grade school, and the only feature of it I remember, in connection with their gas mask, they had to gather in all the peach seed for some reason, and they would have us children put on a search for peach seed, and we would. A lot of people canned peaches in those days, and only just have to find out where they might have deposited the seed, and we'd bring in a lot of seed, bring it into the school yard, and it had something to do with their gas mask, and or the kernels or something of the.
Miss Hall, how many boys from around here went to the war?
Oh my. I don't know. All the boys I knew went to the war. And, I still got some letters. Those old letters from boys who went over, you know. But I thought of something that was so funny I want to tell you about the wartime. And now it's skipping about this wartime. Oh, I'll think of it.
Okay.
I'll think of it.
I was there rationing during the First World War?
Was anyone?
Rationing?
Well, yes. Oh, yes, everything was. We had to present our cards to get sugar or coffee or anything like that. Oh, I'll tell you what it was about the war. This is what I want to tell you. I was working at the variety store. Now, Miss Chester doesn't remember any of this because she was too young. I mean, she wasn't even born. But anyhow, Brazil Gosselin, you know, the tallest building we have here, Brazil built that building. And he was quite enterprising. All right, now, where they have that music store on the corner, across the street from what is now the Towers, that was the variety store that we were in. And Mr. Troutman and Brazil were partners. And they just were school kids, you know. So when the armistice was signed, you know, we walked out of that store. We were so happy and so thrilled. We walked right out. Brazil had gone to the war. That is, he'd gotten on the boat and had started for France. And the armistice was signed. They turned him right around. He didn't know it. And when he got back to New York, he said, well, I didn't know France had a Statue of Liberty. He thought it was in France. So that day at 11 o'clock, on that November day, you know, the whistles blew and the bells rang, and we were all so thrilled. We walked right out of that variety store, got in cars, everybody in town did this, you know. We went around the square just blowing our horns and screaming. We were just all so happy. And when we got back to the store, Mr. Troutman hadn't even locked the door. It was wide open, like it was when we left. And that shows that either people were too happy to think about vandalizing, or the vandals were all at the front. And now, I don't know where the vandals went, but nobody ever entered that store. Wasn't that sweet to live in a country like that? I wish we could say that now.
Yeah.
We could leave our doors open.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
Sir, do you have any memories of Armistice Day?
Armistice, yes, it was a cold, windy day, and I know my father didn't want me to go downtown. They were shooting pistols and shotguns, and he had something coming up over at Tipton, and he took me over to Tipton. They had some kind of justice peace court over there or something, but I went to Tipton that day. But you could hear that firing, and he didn't want me to go downtown. I might get hit by a stray.
I bet you went in there because you were the worst young'un I ever saw to run away. He'd go down to the depot when he wasn't about 6 years old. Well, Ms. Heron's already been home, cooked lunch, she's eaten, and here she is back. When are you going to dismiss us?
We're not through yet.
What would you like to know?
When you first came here, who were some of the prominent people in 1909?
Well, Judge R. was the mayor, wasn't he? JPR?
Probably was, yeah.
Yeah. A very fine old fellow. And Mr. and Mrs. R. was a Baptist. Now, you don't have pictures down. This is incidental. Mrs. R. was a Baptist. Judge R. was a Methodist. And they had married some years before. And they walked. We didn't have any way to ride, and so they'd come from their house up on Grady Street. They'd walk down, you know, and Judge R'd go to the Methodist church and Ms. R to the Baptist church, and he'd say, "The sheep to the right, the goats to the left." He was the mayor of the town at that time. And, oh my, Mr. Hightower. Now, y'all don't even remember the old Hightower home, do you? The George D. Pendletons were our special friends. And,
What did the
he was
Pendletons
rugged.
and Hightowers do? What kind of work?
Hightower?
Yeah.
Bankers, weren't the Hightowers bankers?
Well, yes, he was a banker and a developer.
Yeah,
Those fellows were the fellows that
made the town,
let's see,
you know.
Hightower, McMahon, and Braddock. And they do a lot to get these railroads. I know they gave that was the KCM&O, you know, they give them a bunch of real estate. And
That's where I
they
played
worked together
baseball out in
pretty good.
Hightower Park. You know, just beyond the one the thing, but it was our fence, and we played baseball. Oh my, I was a baseball player. I couldn't bat, but I could run.
When did you start to school?
When did I start to?
When and where?
Sulphur, Oklahoma. Yes, I started to school. I was such a timid child that my mother sent me to school with my older sister, and she couldn't let me enter school when I should have, because I was so timid and so backward, and I still am timid. So I've outgrown that, haven't I? Anyhow, she put me in kindergarten. I went to kindergarten. And I just love my teacher. I can see that woman. I'm 85 years old, nearly 85. And I can see that lovely woman right now.
What's her
I
name?
love her, Miss Marr. Miss M-A-R-R. She's real tall. But to me, she's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Well, she brought me out of this timidity some. I went to kindergarten, and then the next year she sent me to school. And in Suffolk there was only one school, and it was up on the hill here. And so my mother fixed me up and started me. And Lena was to take me, you know Lena. And she was to take me to school. And I said, I won't go to school. I won't leave my mama. I'm not going to leave my mama. So I'll never forget, Mama came out in the street and a whole bunch of kids, you know, going along, and Lena was trying to coax me on, and Mama picked up an old tree. I should have known she wouldn't use that on me, surely. However, if she'd had a switch, I'd have known she would. But anyhow, she just picked up, she said, go on, child, go on. And I went. I cried the first day of school until we came to Altus. Oh, I didn't want to leave my mom. I was the baby.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to school. It was called Cameron,
Cameron School.
the school
Mm-hmm.
in Sulphur. And then we moved out here in '09. I was 10 years old, and I entered the 4th grade out here. And Ms. Dale. Have you ever heard of Ms. Dale?
Mm-hmm.
He was superintendent, Mr. Dale was.
Mm-hmm.
It was his wife. And she was precious. You know, I loved all my teachers. I just loved them. I respected them. I looked up to my teachers. And I hope they liked me.
Did you ever go to that old red brick school that was over on Cypress, one of those streets over there, straight south of here? Remember that old school?
Why, you
What?
mean down here on East Pecan, on West Pecan?
Yes.
Well, that was my high school. I graduated from high school down there.
What year?
Pretty sure you told me.
I don't know.
Oh, you're
1918.
you're talking about West Pecan.
Yeah, West Pecan. Is
You're
that the
talking
school
about-
you're talking about?
No,
It
you're
looks like a
talking
little 4-room school, little
Oh, no, I
two-story
didn't
school.
go there. No, I didn't. But my high school was down here at Lincoln, you know. And in 1918, I graduated from high school.
Can you describe Dr. Dale?
Yes, I can. Dr. Dale was a very impressive man and a very intelligent man, too. And so was Ms. Dale. He was an educator, just a schoolman. And he was tall, very nice-looking fella. And to me, you know, he looked elderly because I was a child. But he wasn't. He was a young man. Ms. Dale was, too. But they were precious people.
What was his personality like?
Very quiet. Very quiet. He was a man of few words, but his words were weighty. I wish we had more people like that.
Mm-hmm.
Weighty words.
Did you go to college?
No, sir. I didn't. My mother wouldn't let me go away from Altus. Unfortunately, we did not have a college like this. I would have been a teacher if I'd had the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
But she didn't want me to go away from home. And so she
1920s.
did. Now, Myrna Braddock went to Missouri to school. We graduated together, you know. And I wanted to go so badly. They sent a representative to talk to my parents, and they could have sent me, but they didn't.
1920s.
So I'm minus a college education, Miss Heron.
Self-educated.
self-educated. That's right, self-educated. Well, it hasn't paid off too much.
It hasn't. 1920s.
1920s.
Mm-hmm. Did you bob your hair?
That's 2 years after I graduated from high school.
Did you bob your hair in the 20s?
No. My mother wouldn't have anything like that. She said, no nice people wear their hair bob. No, sir, we didn't bob our hair. You know what? I had mine, I had red hair, of course, just like it is now. And so we braided it, and it was long. I had beautiful hair. And then we did it up in a kind of a round hickey on each side. Y'all, did you ever see, you girls, did you ever see those hair ribbons we wore?
Those big ribbons.
Yes, I've got a picture. I saw a picture like that the
They're
other day.
pretty.
Great big. You see, we tacked them on to a kind of a foundation. And then we'd pin those things on our hair. Now, you don't know anything about girls' hair. Let's get on to something you know about.
What kind of dresses do you wear in the 20s?
I had the prettiest clothes.
How short were they?
Well, my mother and I sort of had a little difference over that. I thought I was grown, and I wanted my dresses down to my ankles. And she didn't think I was quite that grown. Oh, I got ruffles that long to lengthen my dresses because I wanted to be big, and she just didn't like that a little bit. But my mother was a good seamstress, and she kept us in nice clothes.
Were you a flapper?
No, sir. Oh, I'll tell you, if you all had just had the experiences in life that I've had, you'd, reminisce too.
Did you tell Joe what you told me when I asked you to do this?
I don't know what I told you. I never know one
what
minute
she
what I
said?
said the next.
She said, I'm too busy going forward to reminisce.
Well, that's no joke.
I need a good description of a
Sir?
flapper. A good description of a flapper.
Flapper. Well, you know, my mother thought we should be sedate and rather, you know, dignified, ladylike. And flappers, they just dress gaudily and flirty-like. That's the way flappers did. Yeah, and wore rouge on their faces. And
So you
that
were
was
not a
taboo.
flapper.
I wasn't a flapper. I would have been. I wanted to be. Don't you know?
When did you see your first car?
First car,
Mm-hmm.
I think I had a cousin, Clay Webster, and he became a millionaire in New York City in the oil business. And we went down to Sulphur. He had given his son a car. I believe the name of it was an old Grant, wasn't it, Willis, that we went and had an old horn out on the outside, don't you know? And no front doors. No front doors at all. You just got in the thing, which would be very convenient for me now. So that's about the first one I saw. And then I told you about this Model T that the company bought my dad. He wore out one a year. He was a salesman, you know, one a year. And so,
Tell me about the old movie houses.
oh, we
The
had
silent movies here
we
in
had an
Altus.
opera house over here Where could that have been? The old.
Well, it's where Althus was for years. It's
Mhm. And we had operas, we had Chautauquas. You
You know,
talk
I've
about
never heard-
high-class entertainment, people. Chautauqua is the highest class entertainment there is or ever has been.
Describe Chautauqua.
We had talent. They brought talent here from over the world. Educational, they were. Well, you bought tickets. I think they cost, maybe $1 and something. And I don't know when we got the $1 and something, but we went to the Chautauquas. My mother saw to that.
Describe a Chautauqua. Exactly what
Well,
is it?
we just had the best talent of everything. Sometimes they would be speakers, entertainers of all kinds, but high class. And we're in a tent.
Describe the difference between Chautauqua and vaudeville.
Vaudeville.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Chautauquas were aristocratic. Vaudevilles were cheap entertainment.
Chautauqua was more like they used to call them lyceum, didn't they? They used to have a lyceum. You bought your ticket through the school, and they had to be at the auditorium.
Yes.
And that was the kind of thing that a Chautauqua was. Well, I think we call them lyceum.
With recitations and
Yes, and
things
some musical.
musical numbers.
I remember they always had the tent down here where the post office, the old post office was. That's where the tent was.
They'd do a show in the afternoon and completely change the sets and do a new performance at night.
Sir, when did you start to school?
When I was 6 years old, let's see. By the way, they started me, my birthday is October the 26th, and they started me a little while, well, they started me in September before my 6th birthday. And so that'd be in
1909.
1906 or something like that.
Six.
And I know that, well,
In 1916, was it?
Right.
no, I was born in 10. Yeah, that's right, 16.
What was the name of the school?
It was called Wilson Ward. Now,
And he'd come
Willis
home
Gore
every
wasn't-
day and eat up everything we had for supper. He'd come by, and Granny kept him, Mama kept him, till his folks left the office and came home. And my mother let him get by with things she wouldn't let us. She'd let him eat everything we had for supper, then she'd start from scratch. And so we'd say, Lynn and I'd say, well, Mama, you let Willis have this or that? And she'd say, but he's a growing boy. And the growing girls could wait till supper. We had 3 meals a day. We had breakfast, dinner, and supper. We didn't have dinner in the evening.
Where'd
You
you go to
remember
college?
that?
I never did get a degree, but I first went to junior college here a year, and then I went to OU for about 4 semesters.
Who was head of the college here in Altus?
Well, Professor Cotton was Maurice Emil Cotton, and I know some of the teachers. Let's see, there was Bess Brogan and Helen Hagler and
Miss
Hal
Brogan
Boyd and
was
Hal
his
Boyd and-
teacher.
What did you study?
Bessie.
What was your curriculum?
Well, they had they had a French class. Hal Boyd taught French, and Miss Hagler taught history, and best Rogan taught composition and English. And then I guess it was Violet Shoemaker probably taught mathematics. I don't know whether they had college courses in math. I think they did, though. I think they had some college math.
When did you decide to become a lawyer?
Well, my becoming a lawyer was sort of pointed towards that when I first got out of high school. So I enrolled. My major was government, but I never did go into law school. I took what they call pre-law, but
He studied under your dad, you know.
at that time you could study law in a law office and be allowed to take the examination.
When did you go to OU? What year?
I went there, let's see, went there in 1929 to 1930, and then 30 around to May 31.
Do you know when they stopped letting them study in law offices?
No, I can't exactly, but that's been terminated for, I guess for 30 years now, pretty long time.
It was sort of like an apprenticeship, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. You would be in a law office and you would register and let them know that you were reading law or studying law. And of course it usually took a lot longer than college training, but they would let you take the examination.
When did you take the bar exam?
1942
And where did you take it?
at Oklahoma City at the state capitol.
How'd you score on it?
You know, I never did. I never did get my grade.
They just let you know.
They never did let me know.
They just let you know if you passed, and that was it.
They said I passed. And
He didn't care about his grades. He didn't want to be a lawyer in the first place. Didn't want to be anything. He just
What did you study at OU?
well, we studied all kinds of government, state government, and it was just the general arts and sciences. We had English classes and history classes, and I know my dad had always told me to get into the physics class. And, you know, they, because he thought that was all, if I was going to be a good lawyer, that I'd need to know. But, you know, I went into the physics class, but I sure did. That's one class I never did. You know, I stayed with it till the end. But I remember one time there that that was Professor Dodge. He run that. And I can remember the tedium. They'd had a lot of those fellows were of sort of German extraction, you know, and they were pretty good. And everything had to be done 3 times, you know. I know in their experiments, everything had to be performed 3 times, and that was really tedious. And they got into teaching us how to weigh an atom. Can you imagine? Of course, we didn't do anything like that, but just to be able to tell about it would be something, you know. And I know they, well, anyway, I wasn't prepared for the physics class, but I stayed with it.
I wasn't prepared for geometry either.
I I didn't, what they call that, blue card 'em or
We
something there, you
learned
could
one proposition.
quit if you wanted to.
That
But we had, then I took that military ROTC and just things of that.
Did you
sort.
stay
Public
on
school.
campus or off campus?
I stayed off camp. Well, I stayed in town. I stayed at quite a distance from the campus, across town. I didn't stay in a lodging house. I stayed with some friends, my father's friends,
Okay.
and
guess what? How far I got in geometry.
How far?
I took plain solid, had to, and I learned one proposition. We had the nicest teacher, and she said, "Now, this is a dunce's proposition. If you don't learn this, you're just a dunce." And I said, "Well, I don't care anything about geometry, but I'm not a dunce." And so I learned it. You know what that was, Miss Heron? The square on the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares on the other two sides. Now, that's all I know.
That's the Pythagorean Theorem? Is that what it is? That's a 50-cent word.
50-cent word,
Yeah.
which worth $1 to me. Well, we gotta go. We've just worn you people out. But I thought you'd say, well, this is it. And we could go.
Did you know Dennis T. Flynn?
Dennis Flint,
Flynn.
you know.
He was the representative to the Senate from Oklahoma Territory. You know Joss Lee. Did you know him?
I know.
What governors do you remember the most clearly?
What senators,
Governors.
governors of Oklahoma? Well, wasn't there one named Lee
Cruz.
Cruz? My sister and his daughter were good friends. And so, of course, I liked him.
Did she ever talk about the day she christened the battleship Oklahoma? It was Lee Cruz's daughter went out to, I guess, Virginia and christened the battleship Oklahoma.
Yeah.
1917. Did she ever talk about that?
No, sir. I know. Now, you see, we lost track of them because we moved here, and we didn't have too many celebrities in this section of the country. We were all too
You're
busy
here.
taking care of the dust storms.
Tell me
It was
about
terrible.
the dust storms.
The dust storms.
Describe the dust storm.
You won't believe it. I have seen my mother. Now, we've nearly always lived on that corner, on Lee and Elm, you know. Sister was married there in 1912, and we'd lived there a long time before that. And then in 1924, we moved that old house off on the next lot, the next two lots, and built this house we're in right now in 1924. So you see, we've lived there a long time. But there was no pavement, of course. And Grandpa Stout lived across the street from us. I've seen the dust so terrible that you couldn't see Grandpa Stout's house. No, you just couldn't see it. And Mama, after one of those terrific storms, she would go in to fix breakfast. We had a coal stove, you know. And I told him how you build a fire in a stove. And that stove would have about that much dust on it. Poor thing would have to clean off that stove before she could ever cook. She'd have to clean off the cabinet before she could ever prepare a meal. The table would have dust settled all over it. I've seen Mama sweep up a quart of dirt around her art squares, we called them. Yes.
Would you do anything to try to keep the dust out of the house?
No, sir. I can't think that we did. When the storms came, we took those as the inevitable and made the best of it.
How'd
Take the curtains down or roll up the carpets.
Yes, yes. And so my old auntie, the one I told you about, came through the Civil War, bride, widow, and the mother within a year. This old auntie lived in Sulphur, and she came out to see my mother. She came to spend 2 weeks. And do you know she came in the very midst of one of those storms? She stayed 2 days and went home.
What was her name?
She could, Nations, Nations.
Nations.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
she's come to, sure enough to get in the museum. I'm old enough, but I've got something I want to bring before I pass on. It's Grandpa's old songbook.
Oh,
My Grandpa Ryan's
Uh-huh.
old songbook. And it's a little book about that, it's about that long, and about that wide, and about that thick. And you see, he was a hard-shell Baptist.
Mhm.
And he'd walk 5 miles to this church on Saturday evening for foot washing,
Mhm.
and then take this little songbook. And it was called a liner deal, you know.
Mhm.
The preacher or the whoever did, I don't guess they had song leaders, but anyhow, he'd get up and line the song, read the line, then the people would sing the line. And it's sewed together with the backs would come off, you know, with a piece of percale or calico or something.
Mhm.
But I want to put that in the museum.
Well, I'd love to
I
have it.
guess it would be 150 years old. I don't.
I'd love to have it. Those things are.
I'm finding things
Unique.
every day. Every time I feel like cleaning out a drawer or a closet or something, I find those things that my mother has had, you know.
Well, what else you want to talk about?
Nothing, let's go home.
How come you became a librarian?
Wasn't my fault. Sister was the librarian, you know, Miss Gore. And so she needed help, and she didn't have any help. And she said, I'll tell you, I'm getting $50 a month, and I'll give you half of it if you'll come down and help me. And I said, $25 a month? Woo! You know I'll come down and help you for $25 a month. Well, you girl just don't know anything about salaries.
What year was that?
I guess that was 1931, wasn't it? 1931, something like that. So I went down and helped her, and I had that 25. Did you know I saved money on $25 a month? It didn't do me any good, but I did. And
How did you get your books in those days? Did you have enough money set aside?
no, mostly we had donations, and people were so eager to read that they'd just come down and read those old books until they were worn completely out. And then later on, the city gave us a little appropriation, and on it went, you know, and now look what we have. Fabulous. There's not a city in Oklahoma can boast of a finer library than we have. I hope they're making the people reading conscious. I still say that we have to read. There's where we get our knowledge, is reading. And Jo Drury, you know, she has a master's now in library science. She lives right across the street from me. And yesterday we met out in the street to talk a little while, and Jo said, well, it was over a package, you know, that was just playing it to her, but they brought it to my house, and she says, well, what's the matter? Can't those people down at the post office read? And I said, who can read? Nobody reads these days. I said, our little paper boy brings it, Oklahoma one time. He left a note, and he said, I am your Knew, new, Papper, boy. That boy was about 14 years old. Ms. Herron, I tell you right now, they don't learn the basics, the fundamentals. They don't know how to read, they can't write, they don't know how to spell, do they?
We have a lot of frails in education.
Yes, sirree. I think we need to get back to the basics. You know, if you don't have a good foundation, you can't possibly have a good education.
You have to read, don't you?
What's it? Am I supposed to read this here or take it home?
Read it. Thank you.